Dr. Brand, one of the things that you had said actually before we started this up is that in 6 years of competitive rowing,
Yeah.
you were never out of the boat.
I never missed a day due to injury in 6 years. That's true.
What was your secret behind that? Or is there such a thing?
Yeah, well, I gotta say it's luck. Luck being when preparation meets opportunity. And I was one of those people who certainly was very eager before I was a doctor to learn more about my body and how it works and how to work with it. So when my body was giving me feedback about what was going on, I would be able to take care of things so that an ounce of prevention would be worth a pound of cure. And listening to my body and listening to that biofeedback. So if my certain part of my body is hurting, looking at my technique, my preparation, my training, my recovery, and maybe this is a sign that I'm doing something wrong, perhaps with my technique in the boat, that I can use to improve and not only row faster, but keep myself in the boat more consistently as I'm using pain as biofeedback and making changes.
And pain in particular is something that all of us have experienced at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
Even if you haven't been injured, you've been in pain.
Yeah.
Can you speak to what pain is, how you discuss pain, how you describe pain,
Right.
as something that actually may not be something that's bad for you, but
Right.
something that's actually really good for you?
Right. And we talk about pain a lot in sport as like weakness leaving the body or something to be fought,
Yeah,
right? And as a
the
doctor,
memories are rushing in.
right, you
Right?
know, and as a doctor, I've learned a different perspective on pain, which is based on pain psychology. And it's the idea that pain is a gift that tells the brain when the tissue may be at risk for further injury. So every piece of the body has a corresponding dedicated piece of the brain wired to it. And just like when we lift weights, the biceps get bigger, right? Well, if we keep on sending pain signals from a certain part of the body to a certain part of the brain, this piece of the brain physically enlarges to the degree that even when we stop sending pain signals, this big factory up here may not be able to interpret anything as something other than pain. So with every injury, we have at least three jobs. We have to stop sending pain signals. We got to stop receiving pain signals. Then we got to recalibrate the feedback mechanism. So pain is once again a useful tool and a gift that tells the brain when the tissue may be at risk for further injury.
So you've spoken before about that you have, I think it was 3 strategies,
Right.
and one of these strategies in particular actually has to do with don't do it if it hurts.
Right.
What are these 3 strategies, and how do you employ these?
So I really believe in active rehabilitation, and this is based on my background in evolutionary biology. I believe that back when we were cave people chasing the wild animal to hunt it down, if we twisted our knee and injured our knee, for instance, we didn't have the option to just lay still and rest. We had to keep moving, or we would starve or be eaten. So I think we are evolutionarily designed to engage in active rehabilitation and active recovery, which really goes along well with being an athlete because you don't want to be out of the boat, for instance. So I want my athletes to do everything during the recovery process that doesn't violate these 3 rules. So number 1, if it hurts, don't do it. Number 2, if it hurts more the next day, that was too much. We call that the next day rule. And number 3, no more than 10% increase in the frequency, intensity, time, or type of exercise per week.
So let's say somebody comes into you, they've been doing some cross training, and a person like our viewer has sprained their knee, and it's swollen up.
Yeah.
How can we apply those principles that way?
Right. Well, when you injure your knee and it swells up, this is a system of inflammation and tissue repair that has been evolving over 4 billion years of life on Earth. And what I've learned is that through natural selection, nature does not waste energy on processes that did not convey a selection advantage to someone at some time and help them survive. So rather than be frustrated and annoyed at what the body is doing, I try to help understand what it's doing and support what it's doing. So many times we think, oh, inflammation, quick, take some anti-inflammatory drugs or get rid of the inflammation. Okay, there's some problems with this. So with ibuprofen, for every dollar we spend on ibuprofen, we spend 80 cents on stomach bleeding, kidney failure, heart attacks, things like this. Steroids go into the cell and stop it from doing transcription, which is one of its main jobs. Okay, so you can see these things as steroids stopping the cell, the inflaming cells from inflaming, but they also stop the healing cells from healing.
Is that what you mean by transcription?
Yeah, so transcription, where it's one of the main jobs of the cell, in my opinion, where they have the DNA gets transcribed into chains of amino acids, which then become some of the products that a cell makes. Mm-hmm. So it basically, in some ways, stops the cell from doing its job. So it stops inflaming cells from inflaming. It also stops healing cells from healing. By the way, inflammation was part of healing. So you've kind of stopped things in its tracks. And to me, that's kind of like being really annoyed by a construction site next to your house and sending the entire construction crew home because you didn't like all the noise. However, now you're left with an incomplete construction site and you gotta, hire the crew back at time and a half to come back and resurrect that construction site, which may be harder to resurrect once you've abandoned it. My approach initially would be,
which sounds a lot like some sort of chronic pain syndrome that may have developed, or a chronic injury, which takes longer to actually address and heal.
Right. So what I would do initially is bring the construction crew sandwiches and water to help them finish the job faster. And so we're getting away from some of the more recent treatments of steroids and anti-inflammatory drugs, and actually we're getting back to more traditional practices, such as traditional practices that were done, such as cupping and coining. These days we'll do things like Graston technique or A-stem, or injecting sugar water called prolotherapy, or injecting someone's own blood, or certain variations of someone's blood, such as platelet-rich plasma or bone marrow concentrate, to try to actually support what the body's doing to finish the healing job and move forward.
In your career as a sports medical physician, working with everything from the masters or elite athlete to your weekend warrior, or even maybe your junior rower.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across a scenario or an injury where it was particularly challenging in a way that taught you a lesson in your practice and how you can apply better, more effective treatment for that person?
Yeah, I mean, I've run into a number of challenges in treating athletes at every level. I would say one of the biggest challenges we have as people is in communication, and especially communication between athletes and coaches. There can be a lot of dynamics on both sides of that coin that can actually put people at risk for injury in the first place and slower or lack of recovery after someone's been injured.
Could you then give a piece of advice or kind of illustrate the understanding then based off of your experience to a coach that may be watching in terms of how your role as a sports medicine physician, whether you're directly tied with the team or if you happen to be seeing one of their athletes, can augment their training or their work at the training room or with another provider?
Right. Well, I think that the important thing to establish at the beginning is that we're all on the same side and we all want the same thing, which is for that athlete in that boat to win as soon as possible. And, we have different roles in this thing. I mean, for a coach, their job may depend on that athlete performing, that boat winning. And, these things are just as important to the athlete to have success. However, I know something that I've been guilty of as an athlete myself is not necessarily communicating everything to the coach out of fear. Fear that they'll think less of me, that I'll be taken out of the boat, they'll think I'm less reliable if I'm prone to injury. So I think a lot of these things, especially traditionally, can create barriers between coaches and athletes. And I think more and more, some of the most successful coaches are taking a very brave step, which is opening up more dialogue with athletes, working in partnership. And you'll see this at more like elite levels. I mean, you'll see very high level athletes that work in partnership with their coaches as opposed to more of a paternalistic relationship that we have in some more traditional environments and maybe even some lower levels of sport. So really working in partnership, which is a good skill to develop because these skills won't be necessarily only in sport, but also in work environments later on. Like if you're the parent of a junior athlete, these are skills you want your young child to learn, how to bring their concerns to the table in a respectful and timely manner. Because if sometimes you wait too long to bring these issues up, even though your intentions may have been good, you may put the coach in a very difficult situation. So learning to express what you're feeling, well, first of all, recognize what you're feeling in terms of pain biofeedback and the potential risk of a developing injury. Communicate these things in a timely manner with the coach, who is not your enemy. They are very much interested in your success. And as challenging as that may be, developing the skills of bringing yourself to the table and learning to express your concerns in a team-oriented, constructive manner.
And in a real world sense, with some of the athletes that I've worked with at the elite level, for example, I have one of my patients who was in a situation where the coach was not as eager to communicate the role of, communication and how they're feeling, and was blatantly told, if you are hurting, if you have to go see a physical therapist or go to medicine, don't tell me, do it on your own time. Don't let this get in the way of the work that we have to do. And in talking with some of that athlete's teammates, what we see across the board is after they've finished their career, they're still nursing a lot of these injuries. And then you're looking now, let's juxtapose to today's U.S. rowing team. And I had a chance to chat with a few of the coaches at the recent convention and ask their approach on this. And it's trending very much in the direction that you're talking about, which is terrific. And so what you see are fewer athletes in the training room with longer term issues. They may roll through to work with PT or massage or nutrition or sports med to iron something out, just iron a wrinkle as opposed to stitch a tear.
I mean, I think that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And sort of once the horse is out of the barn, so to speak, some of these injuries, we may never be the same after an injury. So if we could prevent it in the first place, that would be in everyone's best interest, of course.
Do you have any, based on your own experience in rowing or in your own experience treating rowers who have been at whatever level going for gold in their respective level, any specific or really sound advice that you may have been told at one time that you want to make sure you pass on?
So specific recommendations regarding managing yourself as an athlete, or?
The floor is open.
The floor is open. All right. So let me see. Specific advice that I received. I would say.
I can't wait for that. The tension is building. Everybody's getting creeping closer in their chairs to the monitor.
I would say that I'd say more than advice that I received, there's some things that I sort of figured out through the School of Hard Knocks that were important for me sort of staying in the game. And these were things like focusing on the importance of appropriate levels of exercise, which as an athlete you're oftentimes not in control of, but really looking at exercise in terms of aerobic stretching, strengthening, and balancing progressions, and not doing too much too fast, because there's an exponential spike in the incidence of injury if you do progress your exercise too fast. The importance of sleep, the importance of diet, and the importance of mindset are some things that I've learned in my own experience as a rower and then also as a doctor. So something I figured out pretty early in my as a freshman rower at college was rowing is a lot more fun when you've had enough sleep. And as a
Oh,
student
yeah.
athlete,
Yeah.
there's just not enough time to meet all the demands everyone's placing on you. So we need to engage in a process of selective neglect where we decide, okay, I'm not going to do all the readings for this class, and I'm not going to do all the extra workouts for this coach and all these exercises for my athletic trainer. I have to engage in a process of figuring out what's most important for me. So um, sleep definitely is one of those things where I sort of figured out that I needed probably about, I could probably, if I had to push it through finals and whatnot, I could probably perform adequately the next day athletically on about 4 hours of sleep. But to perform academically, I needed probably 6.
Yeah.
But making sure that if you're, for instance, later on at the master's level, setting a 4 a.m. alarm clock for the 5 a.m., practice time, doing the math, going backwards and resetting everything else to make sure you get enough sleep still, whether it's a nap during the day or setting your bedtime early enough to get that recovery. Because it's not the rowing that makes us stronger, it's the recovery from exercise that makes us stronger. So if we're
That's where your body does all its rebuilding and,
Right.
and adapting to that demand you're imposing on it.
Right. So if you're breaking yourself down at practice, when are you going to make yourself stronger and build yourself up? So making sure you're getting enough sleep. It's going to be a lot more fun if you do, and you're going to be faster for it. The importance of diet, especially timing of fueling before, during, and after practice, especially the window right after practice, making sure you're getting the right balance of carbohydrates and protein and whatnot. Working with your team nutritionist to not necessarily work harder, but work smarter and work with the timing of your fueling in and around practice. That was a big one for me. And then mindset, for me as a college rower, during my freshman year, trying to survive in this survival of the fittest sort of natural selection system, it's easy, when you have to miss time with friends because of rowing, or go to bed early because of rowing, or miss a vacation because of rowing. Rowing can quite quickly become something that's the reason for a lot of your unhappiness. However,
the mind, the body, and the spirit is just crushing the spirit sometimes.
Right, yeah. Right. And so you've decided to do this, but it can, depending on how you approach it, it can become not fun. And it went to a degree that I actually quit the team for 1 year in the autumn of my sophomore year. And then, I had a rock in my gut that told me that was just the wrong decision. And I went back to it after missing one practice. And but I decided that it was no longer going to be the reason I was unhappy, that I was choosing to be there. And I decided from that point forward that I was going to not let rowing be the reason I was unhappy, that I was there for a purpose that I was choosing. And I decided to be more flexible and forgiving with myself. So for instance, if my friends were going on a trip to Idaho in the summer, I would go on the trip and I would get up early and I would train and I would do circuits and whatnot. And then I would, enjoy the wakeboarding or whatever during the day. But I would then, I would stay up and I would go to events with my friends and I would make sure I got a nap during the afternoon, or I took a lower difficulty of course load. Basically allowing myself to have more fun. And I called it my own personal program of Save the Attitude, which meant make it fun, make sure it's enjoyable, maybe take some pressure off yourself academically or in terms of social events and things like that, so that rowing becomes more a positive and enjoyable thing.
I can already imagine the Save the Attitude banner that you've had made and put it over the door. So every time you pass through,
That's right.
It's that constant reminder.
Yeah.
Right? Fantastic. Dr. Brand, thank you so much for spending your time today with me and with us, sharing these immensely valuable tools to success